NewsReader is a research project that built a reading machine that can process massive amounts of news in 4 languages. It extracts what happened, who is involved, when and where from the news and stores this information for decades in a central knowledge store using semantic web standards. NewsReader was co-funded by the European Union within the FP7 program. How do we know what happened in the world yesterday? To a large extent, we learn this from the news we read. Nowadays, the amount of news from which we can choose is gigantic. One of the reasons is that our world gets more and more connected and dynamic. Our lives accelerate and news intensifies. Another reason is that more information is published through many different channels. Can we still handle the news? LexisNexis, a partner in NewsReader, estimated in 2013 that they archive over 1 million news articles on a single working day, and also add 500,000 web blogs to the archives. This news comes from 30,000 different sources that more or less talk about the same world and similar events. What does this mean for professionals that need to read 1,000 news articles per day to respond to new developments? How can they judge the impact of the daily news in relation to massive archives of the recent past? Let's consider an example. The automotive industry, a global industry with many players and connections all over the planet. What happened to this industry in the last 10 years? How did it change during the financial crisis? LexisNexis estimates that they have 6 million English news articles that relate to this industry. Using Google to look for Volkswagen takeover in 2013 gave 2 million results, not sorted in time. You can of course use more sophisticated tools, such as Google Trends. It will give the query volume over time and may show if there is a major interest at some point. In the case of Volkswagen, we see a peak with a headline in 2009 that says that Porsche takes over Volkswagen, published by the Business Standard. However, we also see a peak in 2012 with a headline from the Herald Sun that Volkswagen takes over Porsche. So what did happen? It is clear that Google didn't read the news. In fact, Volkswagen and Porsche have been in a takeover battle for many years. Volkswagen, the CEO Ferdinand Piëch, is actually a grandchild of the founder of Porsche. He runs Volkswagen. Wendelin Wiedeking is the CEO of Porsche. He was appointed to save Porsche from bankruptcy and brought the company all the way back to the top. With the money that he acquired for Porsche, he tried to take over Volkswagen for a long time. So Wendelin Wiedeking, running Porsche, wanted to help Volkswagen, whereas Ferdinand Piëch, running Volkswagen, wanted to have Porsche, the company of his grandfather. To know about what really happened and what explains the takeover battle between Porsche and Volkswagen, you have to read a lot of news articles and dive into the archives. In fact, there are too many documents to read, millions for decades. There's a lot of duplications. They're incomplete and they're inconsistent. They mix new with old information and they speculate on the future. They're also very biased and opinionated. So what if computers could read the news? The reading machine. This is why NewsReader built the reading machine. The reading machine can understand the massive information on the changing world expressed in different language texts and represent the core of the information as so-called RDF triples according to semantic web standards. These triples represent events in terms of what happened, who was involved, where and when did it happen. In this project, our machine read 2.3 million articles on the automotive industry, spanning a period of 10 years from many different sources to produce 1.2 billion of such statements, an enormous rich and complex history. Instead of you reading the news and diving into the archive, you can now just ask the machine for help. How it works. The overall process is divided into 4 simple steps: identification, deduplication, aggregation, and perspectivation. First, we determine if 2 pieces of text are about the same event and contain the same entities. If so, we represent them as one instance. Information that the mentions share is then represented only once, resulting in deduplication. Possibly, sources may complement each other, for example, when new information becomes known. This results in aggregation, assuming we can identify the event as being the same. Finally, sources may have different points of view. We keep track of who said what, resulting in perspectivation of the information given the sources. Let's look at an example. We see here 2 titles of 2 news articles that were published on the same day in June 17, 2013. Both titles describe the same event but in different ways. Our reading machine then first tries to find the entities mentioned in the text. We see here Qatar Holding in one title and Qatar in the other title. These both point to the same entities. We can say the same for the Porsche family and founding families, whereas the Porsche company is only mentioned in the first title. We can say the titles have 5 mentions of entities pointing to 3 unique different entities. NewsReader now tries to do the same for events. We can say that sell and buys back mention the same event, and also the 10% stake is the same 10% across the 2 titles. When interpreting the text, we want to be able to infer that it's only 10% that was sold and not 2 times 10% on 2 different sale events. We can thus say that there are mentions of the same instance of sales and 2 mentions of the same instance of 10%. NewsReader therefore creates a representation of the instances in addition to the mentions of the text in the sources. These instances approximate the world, either real or assumed, about which the text reports. For entities, we use the DBpedia database to represent the instances. This database is available as linked open data, contains a lot of background information on these entities, and is used by many other systems to establish identity. Likewise, we can ground the news in a rich system of linked big data. Each mention in the text is thus mapped to a unique URI in DBpedia where possible. For events, there is no such database in which they are recorded. NewsReader therefore creates an artificial identifier for an event just to make the instance unique. In this slide you see that we created event 12, which was referred to with the labels buy and sell in the text. We also see that the event has a type relation to some ontology that defines the meaning. Commerce, money, transfer as defined by FrameNet. This FrameNet type provides a system with the knowledge to interpret the roles of the entities in the event. Who is the buyer? Who is the seller? And what are the goods? Note that 10% stake is not in DBpedia, so we created an artificial URI for this as well. Finally, the event is grounded to the publication date, 17th of June 2013, since it lacks any information on the time. In addition to the distinction between mention and instances, we make another distinction to the model, the perspective. We know for each text who is the source, but also we interpret the perspective of the source towards the information provided. How certain is the source? Is the source confirming it or denying it? Is the source presenting it as a possibility or as an impossibility? Is the source presenting it in the current world or in the future world? Is he negative or positive in terms of sentiment? Finally, the ontology predicts that these events also involve an exchange of money. This information was not found in the current sources and is left open. Reading other sources of news may reveal this information in the future. NewsReader is not applied to single news items, but to process massive streams of news day by day. Each article is processed individually by a cascade of natural language processing modules, or so-called NLP pipelines. We build separate pipelines for English, Spanish, Italian, and Dutch with 13 up to 17 different software modules. On average, these modules find about 100 event mentions in a standard news article. From these mentions, only 5 instances on average appear to report on news events in the world. The rest is background information, speculation, or just talk about the world. The instance information is stored in the knowledge store as semantic web triples with the most important relations. Entities are resolved to URIs or identifiers in DBpedia, and events are interpreted as instances of the event and situation ontology ASO. Every event is grounded to a point in time. Streams of news are compared to information that is already in the database. If the software determines identity of events with previously identified events, new information is integrated with the event instance already in the knowledge store, resulting in further aggregation. We applied the reading machine to 2.3 million English news articles, provided by LexisNexis, which covers the period 2003 till end 2015. We use over 500 GB of disk space and many CPUs to process the data, using a parallel software architecture provided by Surfsara. The processing took 8 weeks and stretched the limits of the high-performance computing infrastructure. This table gives an impression of the result of the processing. We detected more than 420 million mentions of events in the news. We reduced these to over 41 million event instances, a reduction to 10% of the mentions, meaning that each instance is mentioned about 10 times on average. Entity mentions are reduced more. We see that almost 17 million mentions of persons are reduced to 900,000 instances. For organizations, about 24 million mentions to over 1 million instances, and locations almost 12 million mentions to 228,000 instances. The reduction for location is largest. Between events and mentions, over 1 billion triple relations are expressed, and another 94 million triple relations come from DBpedia. In the automotive dataset, we have millions of organizations, people, and events. You can search for individual events in the data, such as Wheelie King being sued. But if you do not know the event, you also do not know what to search for. This is where the semantic framework of NewsReader helps. NewsReader semantically interprets events and people given its ontologies, such as ESO and DBpedia, so that you know what type of event or person specific instances belong to. Our ontologies thus provide intermediate levels that allow you to ask questions at a more generic level, such as all key persons involved in any court examination at any point in time, as indicated by the straight red line in this schema. This will give you a complete list of people and events. Such lists can show trends and developments. For instance, are CEOs now more involved in lawsuits than they were 5 years ago? These lists can also potentially reveal events that you may not have realized and that have been hidden in the massive amount of documents for you and many others. We defined a general methodology in the project to discover such hidden events in the dataset. We assume that there are 3 needles in 3 haystacks to find. The haystack to the right represents the news of today, with an estimated amount of 1 million events. One of these events may have impact and may be relevant. The haystack in the middle contains 1 million people in the database, some of which, or one of them, you're interested in. The haystack to the left represents all the 42 million events from the past that are already in the database and that may contain hidden events that relate to the news of today. You can then start the process by either listing the people or organizations you care about, in which case you simply pick your first needle and then look for events with impact that they are involved in the daily news. Or you may look for impact events in general, regardless of who is involved in the daily news, and then look who is involved. In either case, it is important to know what are the impact events. Impact of events can be derived in various ways by looking at the volume of news, microblogs, or queries. For instance, the way Google Trend looks at the search interest. Or you could look at the strengths of the sentiment in social media. We can also check structured data such as stock exchange values or financial business news to see alarming changes in time. The European Media Monitor, for example, tracks news topics over time in the news brief to see how trending they are. You see here a screen dump of news brief monitor for the daily news published on the 17th of February 2016. The big daily news haystack is cut up in many small haystacks, the colored lines representing different topics. The more news within a topic cluster, the more the line stands out. Trendiness measures the impact in the news and on the readers of the news. This is nicely illustrated here by the fact that the topic goes to sleep when also the producers of news go to sleep and wakes up in the morning with them. Clearly, these monitors do not measure the impact of the event on the people or organization involved in the event, but on the people hearing about that event. Impact on the general public is not the same as impact on the participants of the event. This is where NewsReader can make a difference. NewsReader models the changes implied by the events to the participating entities using the event and situation ontology called ESO. ESO defines which events imply a negative or positive impact on the condition of an entity, either abstract or physical. This is modeled by the value for the condition being higher, plus or lower, minus, before or after the event. Regardless of the exact type of event, such as going down, fall, climb, destroy, damage, get sick, heal, fix, repair, ESO captures the general implication as going up or down on this abstract scale, even if the exact state is not mentioned in the text. We can thus infer that somebody or a company was doing better before some point in time than after that point. This property of ESO can be used on top of the event detection by NewsReader to see what good or bad things happen to particular people or organizations, and thus what the impact is of events on the people involved. Our reading machine can thus conclude on the positive and negative changes for specific companies such as Porsche and Volkswagen, and measure how many of these events have been reported in the news at specific points in time. We show here a graph that is automatically derived from the automotive data set. We can see a peak of positive impact events for Volkswagen in 2008 and consistently more positive impact news than negative in the period after up to 2014. In 2014 we see the negative impact news exceeding the positive news. For Porsche, the negative and positive impact events are less significant. Something good happened to Volkswagen in 2008 and something bad in 2014. Using a graph like this, we can find potential events with impact, positive or negative, for specific entities. If we assume the entity of first needle is given, the NewsReader system can deliver the second needle, regardless of the media attention or trendiness. We can also do it the other way around and find any impact event in the daily news and then find all entities involved if there is no preference for the entity. Here we show this by presenting the event in which Wiedeking had to step down as CEO of Porsche in 2009. For finding the third needle, NewsReader can now reconstruct the past backwards starting from the impact event. It thus discloses the full history as far as relevant or connected to the event with impact in the news of today. Such a history can reveal explanations for the impact event that could remain hidden in the data otherwise. In the case of Wiedeking, we will see that Porsche has been on a quest to take over Volkswagen for many years till they failed to pay the interest on their loans at the start of the financial crisis. Wiedeking had to step down due to his failure to acquire Volkswagen. To help reconstructing stories around the impact events, we defined a computational model for storylines. In this model, we connect events to the impact events through bridging relations. Bridging relations are based on sharing participants and loose causal relations. We build a visualization called Storyteller that can show the stories generated in that way. We show here a screen dump of this tool. The upper part shows the events for entities on a timeline, while the middle part shows the events on rows that form stories, possibly involving different entities but connected. The tool is available online. We summarize here NewsReader's intelligence as follows. NewsReader can find associations between entities and events and likewise discover needles in haystacks. NewsReader cannot automatically find correlations, but it can support data scientists to find these correlations. NewsReader cannot hold anybody liable such as Wiedeking for his actions, since it has no notion of what is true or not, only what the sources claim. For the same reason, NewsReader does not provide any scientific or historical proof. NewsReader can help to find stories, especially events that are hidden in the data, so far unnoticed. NewsReader can present many sequences of events as stories, all structured in different ways and possibly based on different user needs. Obviously, not all stories are equally interesting. We apply NewsReader to different data sets and domains besides the automotive industry. We process the Wikinews data set in 4 languages, since we can freely provide access to the sources as well. Furthermore, we applied it to news on the Football World Cup of 2014, 212,000 English articles, and to English news on human weapon, drug and animal trafficking, 900,000 articles spanning 25 years. Finally, we processed almost 600,000 Dutch documents provided by the Dutch House of Parliament on the bank crisis in the Netherlands. Currently, we are talking to many different companies and organizations about the use of NewsReader technology. A number of the most concrete cases are listed here. The results of NewsReader can be summarized as follows. We created formal models that connect natural language processing and semantic web technology. We make a distinction between mentions and instances, and we model attribution and perspectives. Check out our website for details on GAF, NAV, SEM and GRASP. We build a reading machine with pipelines for English, Dutch, Spanish and Italian that can extract interoperable event data across texts and across languages. We build cross-lingual resources such as the event and situation ontology and a predicate matrix to map the ontology to words in many languages. We developed knowledge store technology to handle massive streams of news and support reasoning with background knowledge. All our code and resources are open source with Apache licenses or Creative Commons. They are also deployable as virtual machines. We defined parallel processing architecture in Storm for stream processing and in Hadoop for large batches. We provided evaluation data for benchmarking this system. The NewsReader project is a collaboration of 3 research institutes, the VU University Amsterdam, the Basque University San Sebastian, and the Fondazione Bruno Kessler from Trento, and 3 companies, Scraper Wiki from Liverpool, LexisNexis Amsterdam, Cinescope Eindhoven. Please visit our website for more information and other slideshows with more detailed explanations. We summarize the project goals here on the last slide.